Welcome to episode 3 of Dinner with Downey. Tonight we're going to work out of my cookbook, the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. It's available at the link below on Amazon. We're working on classic Chicago Thin Crust. This recipe I've been working on 10, 11, 12 years, something like that. I just finally decided to publish it in the cookbook. This is the first recipe you're going to come across. It's on page 30 and 31. It's called Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough. This one is a beautiful thin crust. It's great for curing, it's great for laminating, and it makes a gorgeous deep dish. So this is my go-to. Most of the time I'll do this in a batch of like times 8. We're going to do one batch today, and it's only going to make about 213 grams of dough, which is pretty much the bare minimum that a KitchenAid mixer will take. And we're going to start with a paddle instead of a dough hook. And we might use the dough hook depending on how it comes together. Sometimes a little dry, and I just stick with the paddle the whole time. Sometimes it comes together nice, and I'll switch to the dough hook. One alteration we're going to make is usually use butter. Today I'm going to use clarified butter because I have a ton of it from a failed dry aged steak. It didn't turn out, but I got butter, so clarified it. Number one important thing, if you don't have it, is get a kitchen scale that weighs in grams. I'll move this one over here maybe. And we'll zero it out. If you can weigh your ingredients, especially when you're baking, it will help you with consistency. It will help you if you take notes. I went a little heavy on the water on accident. Take notes, and if it turns out better or worse, take those notes and keep them and reference them. So we have our mixing bowl on our kitchen scale, and we're going to start with yeast, which is 1 gram. And I like using this active dry yeast. I don't like the instant for whatever reason. This is just what I got comfortable with, so this is what I use. With this one, and with Chicago dough in general, you can put all your ingredients into the mixing bowl at the same time and then mix it. The fat and the salt are going to help restrain the gluten from forming. Big, long gluten strands are going to be short and tight, which for Chicago Thin Crust is what we're looking for. We want a crispy, flaky dough. So we're going to put 1 gram of yeast. 2 grams of salt, and if you are familiar with baking or pizza making, this is probably making you cringe. Usually you put your salt in after you at least knead the dough a little bit, just to let the gluten develop a little bit more. In our case, we don't want big, long, beautiful strands of gluten. We want short, tight, constricted strands of gluten. So we're going to put everything in at the same time. So we can go right to the butter then. So it's 2 grams of salt, 1 gram of yeast. We're going to do 10 grams of butter, or in this case, clarified butter, which actually works to your favor because some of the moisture is removed already. And that's kind of an important thing. The more moisture you can get out of this dough, or hydration, the more you can get out before you even go to bake it, the crispier you're going to be. So if you have clarified butter, use it. You can use duck fat, bacon fat, corn oil, olive oil. You can use anything you want, really. Regular butter. But today we're going to use clarified butter. 61 grams of water. And for this, because it doesn't have to be warm water, because we're going to let it proof on the counter for a while, and then we'll knock it down and put it in the fridge. So it doesn't have to be warm water. So 2 grams of salt, 1 gram of yeast, 10 grams of butter, 61 grams of water, and 140 grams of flour. For this recipe, I prefer Sarasota brand flour. It's got more protein and gluten, or helps the gluten develop better than all-purpose flour, but it's not as tight and strict as bread flour. So for this recipe in particular, I like the Sarasota flour. You might not be able to get it where you're at, but it's the same label as Heckers. It's the same picture, same bag. It just says Heckers instead of Sarasota. It's the same thing. So Sarasota or Heckers. We're going to do 140 grams of that. Perfect. And then we're going to keep this out because when we go to roll the dough, what I like to do is whatever flour I'm using in the dough, I like to use that when I roll out the dough. So if it's all-purpose flour, use all-purpose. If it's bread flour, use bread flour. Sarasota, use Sarasota. So everything is in the mixing bowl. We're going to make about 213 grams of dough here. Let's get the old KitchenAid out. They've had this thing for 15 or 17 years, some shit like that. It's been around. Still works. It's not broke, don't fix it. You on this shot? Can we go up here? Good. All right, so we're going to start with the paddle, which looks like this. And the reason we're going to start with the paddle is because there's so little volume in here that the dough hook is not actually going to be able to pick up the dough and knead it and move it around. So we're good with the paddle. You'll see it come together pretty quick. So at this point in the process, it came together, it looks kind of like a shaggy mess. If you're new to making dough, you can let it rest just like this for 3 minutes or so. The hydration will start to soak into the flour, and then you can turn it back on. I'm just going to go right through with it because I already have pre-made dough. So we're just going to let this come together so I can show you what it looks like. So you can see it's coming together a little bit better now. If you're on Facebook, you can't see. Sorry about that. Because we put the fat, in this case we use the clarified butter and the salt in at the same time, the gluten's going to develop, and it's not going to be big, long, billowy strings. It's going to be real tight, constricted strings. And this dough in particular is very low hydration. It's 43.5%, which is, if you're a pizza maker, it's very low. But I did that on purpose. And I'm just going to use the dough hook just for a minute to see if it comes together for you guys. And if it doesn't come together, you just let it rest, like I said, for 3 or 4 minutes. It will start to hydrate. The flour will start to get some moisture in it. And then it'll come together. So fret not. Let's see what we got here. So if these are the results you're getting when you make it, I'll show Facebook here in a second. It's not really coming together, right? So if I just throw a towel over it, leave it for 3 or 4 minutes, I come back, then I could use the dough hook, it'll come together. For the purposes of this video, I'll just make it come together by hand, just so you can see the consistency of it. We don't have to over knead it or anything because we put a lot of fat, well, not a lot of fat, but we put fat and salt in early in the process. We're preventing the gluten from really performing the way it's supposed to. And so we don't have to fully knead it because we're not going to get those big long strands. And now when it comes out of the, I did this by hand, but when it comes out of the mixer, it'll look more like a ball of cauliflower or head of cauliflower than it will a smooth dough. And that's by design. It's very low hydration dough. And so what that does is it helps us to get a real crispy crust when we're done with it, or when we bake it. So it'll be rough around the edges, perfectly normal. This is what we're going for. And there's actually pictures in the book too, the cookbook. on what it will look like, which is more like a head of cauliflower than a smooth ball of dough. So we would take our dough here, leave it on the counter for 4 to 8 hours. It's going to proof up. We're going to knock it down, and then we're going to put it in the fridge. You can use it, if you're not refrigerating it, you can knock it down. You probably have to knock it down twice by the time you go to use it, but you can use it the same day, about 12 hours later. I prefer fermenting it in the fridge 3, 4, or 5 days. That's my sweet spot. You can do it 1 day, you can do it 2 days, you can do it 8 days, you can do it 7 days. After about a week, the yeast starts to die off a little bit. And as the yeast starts to die off, you're not going to get that proofing, which is like the aeration in the dough when you make it. So it might be a result that you actually prefer. I don't like going past 5 days generally, because I usually put some very seasoned toppings on my pizzas. And so I don't like the heavily fermented dough for what I'm doing, because I feel like it competes. So 3, 4, 5 days is my preferred length of fermentation, but you do what you like. We will leave it on the counter. And through the magic of television, I made some dough Saturday. So we're on day 5? Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We're on day 5 for this dough. You can smell it. If I leave this in the fridge for a couple more days, it gets more. Right now it's got like a sweet alcohol smell. As it stays in there longer, it's going to lose a little bit of sweetness, become a little bit more alcohol, and then it's going to become sour. Totally fine if that's what you're going for. For me, because I load up with seasoned toppings, I don't want that for this. I do it sometimes. I don't want it for what I'm doing right now. Real quick, I'll go over the oven setup. Oh, I can do the oven setup when it's in, huh? All right, so put this side. This is a double batch that I made here, and I don't have to weigh it out. All right. So we're gonna dust our bench with flour, and in this case, I'm gonna use Sarasota, because Sarasota is the flour that I used in the dough. If you're doing a recipe that's all-purpose flour, you could use that. You could use semolina. You could use bread flour. Bread flour is a very tense dough. If you use bread flour when you're rolling it out, you're likely to get a little bit more toughness and chew. It kind of messes with the results that I'm going for this one. But if it was a bread flour dough, which there's recipes in there for bread flour, I would use bread flour to roll it out. When I roll, you want to go middle out, because the less you could work the dough, the better off you're going to be in the long run. The more we work the dough, the tighter the gluten's going to get, and you're going to get what I call snapback, where the dough is going to pull in on itself when it bakes. And I've had pizzas, depending with a heavy amount of salt, and way too much working it, and scalded milk as part of the hydration. I've had pizzas that were 12 inches come out as 8 inches because of the what I was talking about there, the restrictions. I haven't done this one in a while, huh? Uncle Peppers. So this recipe makes 213 grams of dough. You can use as little as 160 for 12-inch thin crust. You can use the whole thing. You could use more than that if you wanted to. I prefer like 180, 190, somewhere around there. For most things. If you're really loading up your toppings, if you know what the toppings are that you're going to be doing, that usually has an enforcing measure on my decision making. I'm curious if anybody out there is doing New York or Neapolitan style dough and hasn't done this yet. If it's cringeworthy watching the process. It's blazing hot in here today, huh? Humid over hot. So this is a 12-inch pizza circle. We're going to cut just slightly larger than this. No matter what you do when you're baking the pizza, it's going to shrink a little bit. And by putting, I have a pizza cutter here, putting it at a slight angle, I'm going to cut it at about 12 1/8 inches all the way around. Instead of 12 inches, because it's still going to shrink, and it's probably going to shrink to less than 12 inches, even with this added bit of dough. If you were with us for the last episode, we did a cornmeal crust. The cornmeal crust is incredibly forgiving, even if you add some more flour. This is the trimmings of this dough, but we incorporated flour into this. This dough is not as forgiving, but because it's so warm in here, I feel like we will get to a place that is okay to use it. We just bury it in the middle, form a ball, and see how smooth this gets after it sits for a couple days? Hang on this camera. See how smooth that gets after it sits for a couple days compared to when we first start out and before it gets hydrated? So this is the dough we just made. You can see it's lumpy. It looks more like a head of cauliflower than a smooth ball of dough. But after it sits and it hydrates and it really comes together, you get something like this. We'll put it on top of the stove where it's very warm, and that will help it come together a little bit more because we added that drier dough that's just been worked, so the gluten in that's real tight. So we'll get it warm and relaxed for our next pizza. This is a pizza docker. You can use a fork or 2 forks and just go at it. I think this was like $4 or $5 when I bought it, so it was worth it over using the forks just because it's a lot less work when you're doing it. I like to go middle out, and you can see it pulls the dough with it as you're docking. And so if I go start at the end, I'm going to push it to the middle, and I want to keep it as close to 12 inches as I can. And what we're doing is all this is doing is preventing air bubbles from forming, right? So the little air bubbles that you see when you get pizza, I like them. A lot of people don't like them. But by docking it, the air bubbles can only form in the dough between the circles, or the pokes, the holes, right? So the biggest, about the size of my thumb, it's going to be the biggest air bubble that we can get. So by docking it, we just prevent big air bubbles from forming anywhere on the dough. A little trick of the day. I use a wooden peel when I make my dough, or when I make my pizzas, because it's much easier to launch onto the stone with. If you use the metal peel, which I'll use to take the pizza out, what happens is that the moisture leaving the dough, because it's always trying to dry out, that's just nature, has nowhere to go. So with the wooden peel, it's porous, so it'll take that moisture in. The metal peel is completely non-porous, so that moisture sits in between the peel and the dough sticks to the peel. We don't want that. Always dust your peel, and I dust based on the recipe I'm using. This is a very classic crispy thin crust dough. So these are breadcrumbs from some Toronto style rolls that I tried to make. An experiment that I did. And I didn't want them to go to waste, so I made them into breadcrumbs. You can use breadcrumbs, you could use semolina flour, you could use any kind of white flour, you can use cornmeal. For this recipe right now, I'm using breadcrumbs because it's not going to alter the texture. Like cornmeal will give you that resistance. This won't alter the texture. It'll kind of blend in. But also, it's not going to change the flavor. Cornmeal on this dough would give it that corny, sweeter taste. And for this, I don't want that. Always give your peel some shakes like this to see that the dough is loose. And we're going to continue to shake it as we make the pizza. I'm going to take a lot longer to put this thing together than you will at home. It's because I'm talking through it. But normally you can go from start to finish in a minute and a half, 90 seconds probably. Forgot to get my tomatoes. So for me, I don't do a seasoned sauce, and I don't cook the sauce. I don't add sugar to the sauce, which is a big... out here, sweet sauces are a thing. I like very bright, slightly acidic, natural tasting tomatoes. This is De Fratelli. I don't know how you pronounce it. These are very good domestic tomatoes. If you get, where are these grown? Is California or Indiana, or what do we got? Ohio. Ohio tomatoes. There's some very good California tomatoes out there. There are some very good imported tomatoes out there. However, for this combination, I'm going to do a classic Chicago. So I'm going to do sausage, pepper, onion. It's fairly heavy, so you're going to get just a touch of the acidity from the tomatoes and the brightness. And then it's going to go away almost immediately because we're going to load it up with some very heavy tasting ingredients. If you're doing very basic, simple pizzas like a margarita or cheese or just, say, peppers or something like that, then it's very important to get a very clean, high-quality sauce or crushed tomatoes. Not a sauce, crushed tomatoes. Always give little shakes. So I want to make sure we're loose on the peel. And then you can season it here. I like to season it after because then I get the little sweetness and the acidity and the brightness from the tomatoes and then the seasonings as I'm tasting it. If you blend this all together, it's going to become a homogeneous flavor. This is Chicago Johnny's Perfect Pizza Seasoning. It's available online. And you can use as little or as much as you want. If you're just seasoning yourself, you could just use oregano. You could use oregano basil. Generally, you don't cook sauce for this, or I don't. But you could do garlic powder, onion powder, oregano, basil. I like crushed red pepper. You can see some crushed red pepper flakes in there. Actually, I add more crushed red pepper usually when I go to eat it because I'm a nut. Sharp cheese is next. When I get this out of here. So we roll our dough out, we dock it, put it on our peel, dust it with breadcrumbs, and then we put crushed tomatoes, season it how you want, and then you use a sharp cheese. In this case, we're using Romano. If you're doing a simpler pizza, you'd want like a high quality Romano, like a Pecorino, an imported Pecorino Romano. Maybe a sharp provolone. Even Fontanella is good. Just something that will shine through a little bit. Because you're making a simple pizza, each ingredient itself would be that much more important. Today we're using Romano because Pecorino Romano is absurdly expensive right now. All right. Another thing that we do out here that other areas don't is we use raw Italian sausage. This is just Italian sausage I got from one of the markets, and then I added some fennel to it. And the reason we can do raw Italian as opposed to, like, say, a New York style or a Neapolitan is because we're in the oven for so long that the sausage will actually cook. I like to put the sausage under the cheese, under the melted cheese, so mozzarella or provolone, because then the fat will kind of get dispersed into the sauce or the crushed tomatoes. If you put the sausage on top of the cheese, The cheese is expelling fat. The sausage is expelling fat. Depending on other toppings, other things are happening. There's not a whole lot of places for that fat to go. It's not really going to dry out in the oven. So this way you get to get the flavor of the sausage without the greasiness. Where if it was on top, the sausage might dry out a little bit. And then you'd have a greasy pizza. Because that was raw Italian sausage, I'm going to wash my hands. We have our oven set to 500 degrees, and I have a stone all the way on the bottom. I also have a stone near the top, and I'll go through that process in a minute. But if you have two stones, it'll give you more options when you're making your pizza, so you can play with it a little bit more. So sausage, we'll do onion. I like onion underneath the cheese most of the time. It's kind of one of those ingredients that's not wet but not dry, and so you could do it on top or underneath. These are very thin, smaller pieces, so I like going underneath so they don't dry out. If I was doing, say, like spinach, and that's going to go on top, or spinach and tomato, the moisture coming off of that stuff is going to prevent the onion from drying out as much. So depending on your toppings, you can put it on under the cheese or on top of the cheese. And then comes the cheese. And when I say cheese, I mean like the melty cheese going on top, right? Like mozzarella or whatever. This is a blend of low moisture whole milk mozzarella. It's very important there's low moisture. And provolone, but deli provolone. Slicing provolone, not the provolone that you would get like in the Half Moon. It's very sharp and intense. This is more creamy, but with the mix of the whole milk mozzarella, which is more fattier cheese, great for flavor and gooiness. But I want a little bit of resistance in there so that cheese doesn't just run all over. And that's what the provolone is doing. Some people will do low moisture whole milk mozzarella and then also low moisture part skim mozzarella. That'll give you a similar effect, but the provolone's got a different flavor to it that I enjoy. As we were saying earlier, you want to keep giving it shakes. Make sure you're loose on it. This dough, like I was saying when we made it, was 43.5%. So it's a very dry dough to begin with, very low hydration. So it slides around pretty well. Some doughs you start getting up to 60% or more, and they stick a lot faster. So you really have to pay attention to it. This is a good dough to really play around with. Kind of like if you, I don't know if anybody's made sourdough or gotten into sourdough. If you can start with a lower hydration sourdough, it's easier to manage. And then once you learn the process, you can go to something else. This is a very low hydration dough, so your results are always going to be better than a high hydration dough where you might not actually understand how your oven's working, timing and stuff like that, toppings, ratios, all that kind of shit. The measurements for ingredients, as far as weight goes, are in the book, the Chicago Pizza Cookbook, which is in the link. And off the top of my head, I don't remember. So how I came up with that is I made, it had to be like 2,000 pizzas, maybe more. And then I took the averages of what, and I took notes on all of them. I took the average weights of the pizzas that had the best results consistently. That's how I came up with how much toppings you should put on. Obviously, this is a 3-topping pizza. Nothing's really competing with itself. None of them are real wet ingredients. But if you're doing something like a spinach tomato pizza, that's 2 very wet ingredients already. You don't want to add a 3rd wet ingredient. You could add a 3rd ingredient. You just don't want it to be wet. So we'll make sure we're loose. We'll wipe off any excess stuff on the peel, because anything that is on the peel that is not benefiting the cooking of your pizza is just going to make a mess in your oven, and eventually it will burn, or you'll have to clean it out. So I'm going to go on the bottom stone, and we're going to start at 10 minutes on the timer. And while that's in, we'll go over real quick the oven setup. So this is, am I here? This is the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. It's available on Amazon. There's a link in the this title, description, whatever you call it. There's a link somewhere. And on page 41, we have the oven setup. We have a setup for deep dish, which is different, and thin crust, which is what we're using now. I have 2 stones in there. One's on as low as it would go in the oven, and the other one is 1 rack below top. So when I put it in at first, I put it on the bottom stone. That stone is blazing hot because it's been preheated and we haven't cooked anything in there yet. So what's going to happen is the bottom of the pizza, the crust, is going to cook faster than normal. And if you can see all the space between the stone and the top of the oven, there's a lot of space for the air to move around. So the top of the pizza is not going to cook as well. So having a second stone, and you don't always need this. On this one, we probably will just because the bottom stone is so hot. It gives you the option of moving it to the top. And when you move it to the top, your bottom still cooks, but not as intensely. And then there's not a lot of movement for the air, so the heat is reflecting off the top of the oven back onto the pizza. So it cooks the top better. If you have wet ingredients, it helps dry it out, like spinach, tomato. In this case, we're probably just going to use it to brown the cheese mostly. This book also has recipes for school lunch pizza, if you guys remember that. The first published deep dish recipe, Rick Ricardo's deep dish, which then eventually became Pizzeria Uno, but I'm sure the recipe is very different. And what's unique about that, and I didn't know it when I was doing it, but I was playing around with scalded milk, scorched milk, when I was trying to find hydration types. And so sometimes I'll use beer or a white wine, mix both of those I mix with water. So the alcohol content doesn't kill the yeast. But you could use milk, you could use whole milk, half and half, scalded milk. That's pretty much it for the hydration types. But the fat types can all change. So this was clarified butter. You could use butter, oil, corn oil, olive oil, avocado oil, vegetable oil, whatever you want. Coconut oil, but the refined coconut oil, which, by the way, it gives amazing results. Refined coconut oil, believe it or not. I've used duck fat, tallow, bacon fat. Bacon fat and beer was a good combination if you want a real fun pizza, right? All right, so we're baking that in. We got 7 minutes to go. So what I'm going to do is start my next pizza. So we don't have dead air. So this is the other half of the dough that I took out earlier. It's going to have some resistance, some pullback to it because it was just worked. So it's not going to turn out as thin as the other one. And because I know that, I could load this one up with a little bit more toppings because it's going to be a little thicker. But then it's also going to take some adjustments in the oven because of that. If you get the cookbook, there's the lamination processes in there, which is essentially what we're doing here. So we took the old scraps of dough and we mixed it in the middle of this ball of dough. And what that's going to do is going to laminate the layers. And in between the layers, there's that new flour that was added. So you're going to get pockets where air bubbles can form. That's called lamination. It'll be a little bit wavy, real small pockets of air. This one won't have a ton of it. If you're going to do that process, what you do is you roll it out a little bit, fold it over, roll it out, fold it over, roll it out. And it's going to incorporate little layers of flour. Kind of like a croissant would have, except the croissant is getting those pockets from moisture from the butter. This is getting those pockets because the flour is preventing the dough layers from sticking to each other. Also, because this was recently worked, it's going to snap back, so we're not going to get a full 12-inch pizza by the time this comes out of the oven, but we can get close. Pizza is a nice middle ground because it's kind of baking, which I'm terrible at. It's kind of cooking because there is some adaptations to it. have a very hard time baking because it's so by the book. That's just not me. So pizza allows me some freedom. To play. This is actually rolling out much nicer than I thought it was going to. Again, I'm rolling middle out. So even when you see me come all the way across, I'm not really putting pressure on it until I get to about here. Or if I'm going the other way, until I get to about here. That's important because the less you can work your dough, the less resistance you're going to have when you bake it. You see how much it's pulling back? More than the other one if you guys were with us for the first pizza. That's because the gluten is not relaxed, or as relaxed as it could be. It's tense, it's tight. It wants to come together, it's a little cold. Well, not really cold, I guess. Because we took care of that problem. So right now I could feel that I'm heavy here and lighter here. So I'm just going to give it a couple more rolls to get this smoothed out a little bit more. There's no perfect way of doing this. Whatever makes you happy. So even you saw that little rocking thing that I was doing here. I'm pushing on the way out and then coming back and not pushing. Push, not push. Push, not push. Push, not push. And then because I know this is a dough that's going to come together, it's going to constrict. You do a little flop like this. That's going to give the dough a chance to come together a little bit before we put it in the oven. If I just roll it out and I leave it tense and I cut it to 12 inches, it's already going to snap back a little bit before I put it in the oven. So by doing this, I'm just letting the dough come to its natural form. Again, we're going to cut to 12 inches, roughly. We're going to keep our cutter at an angle. So we're going to be slightly larger than 12 inches. And you'll see if you stick around for both these pizzas, this pizza is most likely, if not definitely, going to be smaller than the first pizza when it comes out of the oven. And that again is because of we added some flour when we mixed that first dough, but also because the dough is not as relaxed as it could be. So it wants to shrink and come back together. Feel like tense. Like if you get tense, you know, you're nervous, you don't want to deal with shit. Tense up. That's what this dough is doing. You smell this? It's a good one. Again, this is a pizza docker. We're going to go middle out. Just like, but very different than Silicon Valley Boys. Again, this is just preventing the air bubbles from forming. That's all it's doing. We're going to move on to our peel. And like I said, the second dough is is likely, if not completely, going to shrink back a little bit. I could feel I still had some breadcrumbs on there from the first pizza, but I could feel a little bit of resistance as I was trying to shake it. And so to combat that, we're just going to add a little more breadcrumb. You can use any breadcrumbs. I don't use seasoned breadcrumbs ever, unless I'm seasoning them for something. So this was literally, I did some Italian beef roll experiment. So what do we do, like 12 rolls? 12 9-inch rolls. There's a lot of freaking bread. Obviously, we weren't going to eat all that. I didn't want to just throw it out. So I made it breadcrumbs. Because this dough is slightly thicker than the first one, we could load it with either more cheese, more sauce, more toppings, or all of the above, and then have it in the oven for a longer period of time. I am going to add, Jewel had bell peppers on sale, all colors. So I got yellow, I got orange, and I got green. So we're gonna do a pepper pizza. Pepper pizza. All right, so what did I say? This was 10 minutes so far? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good looking freaking pizza. All right, so at 10 minutes, we see a few things. Are we up here? This side of the pizza is cooking much faster than this side because it's too close to the back of the oven. But it's crispy as hell. And you can see that this part is darker than this part for the same reason. We're moving this up to the top where we're going to try and cook this more. And because I'm going to do that, I'm going to bring this part more towards the front of the oven where it's not as hot. And this part towards the back where it's more hot. This is a great freaking dough. Look at this. I love this recipe. So we were in for 10 minutes on the bottom stone. Probably going to do about 2 to 2.5 minutes on the top stone here. And as I'm making this pizza here, I'm going to take my time just because I want that bottom stone to really heat up a little bit. If I put this on that stone right now, that stone is probably somewhere around the 550 degree mark when we put that first pizza in. And that's because the oven heated up for an hour before we put it in there and we didn't cook any of the pizzas. So the oven was heating it up. And we weren't taking the heat away. Now we're going to put something room temperature on it. And it's going to pull the heat out of that stone. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a soggy bottom pizza, just like the soggy bottom boys of Oh Brother Where Art Thou. We don't want to live in constant sorrow. Is that the movie? Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm clever. Oh, it's freaking hot, man. All right, so we're going to, same thing with the first one. We want to give a shake every now and again to make sure we're loose. But like I said, this is a very low hydration dough. So it's not something we really have to worry about, but you definitely want to be in the habit of doing that. Seasoning. So at this point, you would do oregano, crushed red pepper, basil, salt, granulated garlic, granulated onion if you wanted to. Or if you go online, you can get Chicago Johnny's Perfect Pizza Seasoning, which is my product. Try and get it off of the peel because, again, anything that's on this peel that's not going to benefit the cooking of the pizza, it's just going to burn or we're going to have to clean it out. So if we can prevent it from going in the oven, we're better off. This is Romano. You can use any sharp cheese you want. Provolone, Parmesan, Pecorino Romano, Fontanella. I haven't used it in a long time, but... Oh, Fontanella. I haven't used Fontanella in a while, but Fontanella is amazing with bacon. If you're doing a bacon type pizza, which is, for me, most of the time, bacon's too overpowering unless it's in like a meat pizza. Same thing with pepperoni. But if you're using bacon, Fontanella is a great complement. So we went another 2.5 minutes. And that is beautiful. Way up here. So this darker part is the part that was in the back of the oven the first half. If you remember, this was cooked way more than this, which still is, but it leveled out a little bit because I saw that, I adapted, and I put the part that was cooking more to the front of the oven and the part that didn't cook as much to the back of the oven. So that minor adaptation is, just those little things really help you to have a better end product. Oh, this is good. Crispy as shit. All right, so we're gonna let this cool for a minute before we cut it, and we'll work on this other pizza. I'll put it here as a teaser for you guys. You guys and gals. All right, so we're gonna do a 3-pepper pizza. What happened? Oh. We're gonna omit the onion on this one because we're gonna do a lot of pepper. And because this is 3-pepper pizza, I have roasted red peppers too. Maybe I'll throw that on there. I want something to counteract all that happening. So we're going to put sausage underneath. And that's going to give us a little bit of fat, a little bit of saltiness, a little bit of depth. And then we're going to put all the peppers on top simply for aesthetics, because if I was putting this much toppings on, I would normally split it up a little bit, some underneath, some on top. But because we got this beautiful color of peppers, trio, maybe quadro. Should I put red peppers in there? I don't have jalapenos prepped. I put jalapenos. But anyway, because we have those beautiful colors, we don't want to hide them. So we're going to put those on top. And this is where it gets tricky, right? This is all the sausage I have left. I don't want to waste it. I'm not going to fry this up. So I'm going to sneak in little pieces just around the edges, so I don't waste anything. Waste is a terrible thing. You know what I mean? Wash our hands. So when I come over there to wash my hands, what angle shows my best? Should we get a camera just for avoiding that? All right, so we're gonna give it a shake. We always want to keep the pizza loose. If it starts to stick, the problems you get from it sticking are just so drastic that you don't even want to get to that point. So if you can prevent it, prevent it. So the other pizza was a perfect amount of cheese for that. I'm going to go a little bit light of cheese on this one because I'm going to do 3 types of peppers on top, and they're all going to be slightly wet. They're not like wet ingredients, but they're just a little bit wet. And so if I put too much cheese with all those peppers, all the moisture in the peppers, it's going to prevent the cheese from browning, possibly prevent the crust from crisping too much. Those are things you just want to avoid. Again, when I'm giving you these notes, it is strictly for the Chicago style thin crust. There are many types of pizza in this world. This is just one of them. I like a mix of, for the most part, most of the time, low moisture whole milk mozzarella, about half that, and then about half of deli provolone, which is the stuff that comes in the big rounds and they slice it. It's not cured or smoked or anything like that. It's a little drier. The texture is a little different than mozzarella, so it gives you a nice blend. So that's what this is. Shake, shake, shake. And now we go to our beautiful trio of peppers. And one problem I used to run into all the time and still often do is I will overload a pizza because I get so excited seeing all these beautiful colors. So be mindful of that. I know I have 2 other types of peppers coming in, so I don't want to just go batshit crazy on loading the toppings. We'll do yellow last because they're least likely to show up. You can see the color of the pizza after it cooks. Yellow peppers kind of gonna get lost in there. So next we'll do orange. We're coming into season here. We are fortunate enough to have a farmer's market literally down the street. We can walk to it. And when you're doing any kind of cooking, really, if you can keep in season for most of the stuff, you'll be doing all right. Actually, a lot of times I will make meals based on 2 things. One, whatever's in the fridge, open it up. This zucchini's got to get used or whatever it is. Start there. If I have everything here, I'll make it something with it. If not, I run to the store. I like to walk through. I do grocery pickups or deliveries all the time. One thing I like to do is find my produce and find my meat. And as you're walking through the store, you can see what's in season, what looks good. I mean, if you think about it, generally if the produce looks really good, it's probably in season. You can see when produce is not in season, when you get like little baby strawberries, or they're kind of oddly shaped, or they look dry. So it's important as you continue your cooking journey to pay attention to that. Should I do red peppers? I think it's too wet, maybe. Actually, the acidity from the roasted red peppers would probably be good for this too. Roasted, oh, quick pickled red onions would be beautiful on this. But I don't have any. Looking for roasted red peppers. I found them. You'll notice in all these containers, after I cut the vegetables, we prepped all this stuff yesterday. I put towels in each container, paper towels. And what that does is as these, the peppers start to release some of their moisture, instead of sticking to the lid and becoming a wet pepper, it gets absorbed by the paper towel. And that gives us a much better end result. Give it a shake. Roasted red peppers, obviously much wetter. Than regular peppers because of the brine. Yeah, I think this acidity is a good call. So at first I was thinking put red peppers on here for color, right? And then I thought, well, that's too many peppers. Let's not do that. And then I thought, well, the acidity is going to play really well with the sausage and all these bright peppers and flavor. Keep it light. Brevity. Some flavor combinations on pizza especially can be too heavy, and it kind of takes away from your end product. That's a loaded pizza. The reason I could put this many toppings on, and I don't know if what you get this camera here. I'll do it. Look, you come to this one. I'll give you a side view here. You can see how loaded that is. What are we, an inch and a quarter? And then to give you a perspective, this was the cooked pizza and how thin it was. So this was a very thin crust, and I wanted to keep it crispy, so I did that. This crust is still very thin, but it's probably about 20-25 grams heavier than that crust, which will allow us to load it up a little bit so we can keep it in the oven longer. Another thing that's happening is that the stone in the oven didn't fully come up to temp. So that's going to allow us to bake it, start to get everything cooking well, and then we'll move it to the top. And what's going to happen is that because of the prolonged time, or the longer time being in the oven, the bottom's still going to crisp up nice, but the top is still going to dry out and melt the cheese and brown it. So we're going to put this in even though the stone is not fully up to temp. And this is part of where I really appreciate cooking over baking, is being able to play around with this stuff. Might sound a little weird, but I am a little weird. One thing you can't see at home, so we're going to start at 10 minutes on this one. We're probably going to have to go another minute or two on the bottom and then move it to the top. But one thing you can't see at home is the stone I have in there. It's actually a piece of granite countertop, but it's big. And so the first pizza I cooked on this side of it, and then the second pizza I'm cooking on this side of it, and about halfway through I can move it. It's because this stone, part of the stone, is going to heat up again. Just stupid little tricks that can help you out with your end process. End product. End product. So this is our 12-inch thin crust. Classic Chicago topping, sausage, pepper, and onion. Very thin. Very thin. One thing you notice, I brushed this all away because when I go to cut the pizzas on these cardboards, they just slide. And they're probably still going to slide. And then I look like a fool on TV. So anyway, we can see this one shrunk. Not terribly much, though. Right? Do you see it? More than anything, it curled a little bit on the edges. We lost a little bit on those sides, but overall, a very gorgeous pizza. You hear that? Huh? You hear the crunch? Well, you can hear it. You're right there. All right. Let's see what the bottom of this looks like. Where are we at? This one? Oh, whatever. Oh, it's beautiful. I like to see gradient colors. I don't like to see pale and like black. And it's a preference thing again, I guess. And I'm so much of cooking and eating is just so friggin' arbitrary. But this lets me know that it was cooked. Well, it wasn't. The oven wasn't too hot. The oven wasn't too cold. It's too cold, you get a lot of very pale spots, and not a lot of browning. If it's too hot, you get a lot of black spots, and then very white spots. So this is pretty much perfect texture, consistency. You can see some of the blackening. So this is the part that was on the back, but you could see that this isn't like pale white. Sometimes you get this high contrast color, and that is one I do not like it. This one I like. So fucking good. Immediately get, because this dough was aged 5 days, immediately get a little bit of funk. Crisp, crunch. The brightness of the acid in the tomatoes, and it gets almost immediately taken away by the sharpness of the Romano. So I always talk about rolling flavors when I'm trying to describe stuff to people. And to me, that's a good balance. Rolling flavor. So I don't want to put this down. So we were talking earlier, I didn't season the tomatoes before I made a sauce. I just put tomatoes down and then I put the seasoning down. And that gives just an added step to excite your taste buds. Instead of it being a homogeneous flavor all at once, it's little pops here and there, and they roll around in your mouth. That is my preferred anything, really. Maybe not dessert. I can deal with just a straight sweet dessert. But any kind of actual meal, I love the rolling flavors. And these flavors are perfect. You can see the sausage is cooked. And some of you that are not from the Chicago area or Midwest were probably looking at me like I was some kind of fucking idiot. But I'm not. Not all the time. Some of the times. So sausage can go under the cheese or on top of the cheese. You can see the parts that were exposed. They dried out a little bit, which is good. Again, it's the contrast of stuff, right? So you get the different textures just from the sausage. You get the dry, crispy bits on top, and then you get the nice, chewier, softer sausage underneath. The onions give you a nice crunch. The peppers, when you slice them this thin, and I prefer the thinner slices, they give you the flavor without the texture, but you make up for that with the onions. This is overall a fantastic fucking pizza. Uncle Pepper's crispy Chicago dough. We got the other pizza coming out here in a few minutes. Actually, we're about halfway through, so I'm going to move it from... So I was saying the stone is like this, right? And I cooked the first pizza over here. Second one's over here, but this one's still heating up. So I'm going to move the pizza. I'm going to rotate it. So it's taking the heat from the now hot part of the stone. Do we have any questions? No questions. Make one up. So anyway, we're making recipes from the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. It's available in the link below. This one we were working on specifically today was Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough. What's that? Gonna fight me? So this is a very low hydration dough. It's very forgiving when you're in the oven. No matter what you do, you'll get a pretty crispy pizza, even if you overload it with toppings. 43.5% hydration, 7% fat. And I put all the hydration percentages and all the fat percentages in the cookbook for each recipe because it's important. You'll see what you like as you keep baking them. You'll say, oh, well, I really do seem to like these ones with the higher hydration or lower hydration or the more fat or less fat. So you hone that into yourself. I also put an inclusive percentage, which is the fat percentage and the hydration percentage added together. I put it in here and I haven't seen a consistency to it, but I know there's one out there. So I put it in here for all of you to see what consistencies you can see. You see that the inclusive percentage is very low, and that's the pizzas that you like, and there's a reason for it because the inclusive percentage being low gives you a drier pizza. It's not as flaky because you don't have the fat in there, and that's what you like. Let me know because I know there's a reason for it. I just haven't found it. And then this is how to make a thin crust pizza. So you roll out the dough, trim it, dock it, put on your peel, dust your peel and put it on your peel, sauce it, or just crushed tomatoes is what I use. Sharp cheese, melty cheese, bake. And then there's also, you heard me talk about wet ingredients and dry ingredients. There's a chart here for that. So your wet ingredients you generally want on top of the cheese. Your dry ingredients you generally want under the cheese, or stuff that will dry out or get too crispy. There's certain ingredients like bacon, which is up to preference. Most of the time I like the bacon underneath the cheese because I don't want it to be so crispy, because I feel like it's just too much crisp on crisp on crisp. All preference. Pepperoni can go under the cheese or on top of the cheese. I know a lot of places do under the cheese. That's generally how we had it growing up. I love it. I am not a big fan of pepperoni in general, so when I do have it, I get the 3-inch circles, like deli pepperoni, and I cut them into 6, so I get triangles. And then I put them on top of the cheese usually. Sometimes I do under and on top. And when you put those on top of the cheese, the real thin points, I think I have some here from yesterday. The real thin points in the edges, because they're triangles, they crisp up real nice. And then they kind of, they don't cup, but they get a wave texture to them. And then the middle stays relatively tender, and then the edges get crispy, and the points get a little bit charred. And that is what I like. Unpopular opinion. Not a huge fan of pepperoni on pizza. I like it on sandwiches. I just feel like on pizza it's too strong of a flavor. It's just me. It's just me being me. What else we got here? Cured crust. I go through techniques in the cookbook. Curing a crust is basically, so you saw me roll out the dough, and trim it, and then dock it. And instead of putting it on a peel at that point, I would put it on parchment paper that has been greased and or dusted with cornmeal or breadcrumbs. And then I leave it exposed to the air for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever I want. And it forms a crust, a skin on the crust. And so it dries it out a little bit before you actually put it in the oven, which then helps you to get a crisper crust. This was 10 minutes so far? Probably 10 minutes. And I'll show you why I have 2 stones in here now. So this was all on, this was all on the bottom stone so far. It's crisping up nice, hot as fuck. But you can see the top isn't browning, right? If I leave it on the bottom stone, we're gonna get a very crisp crust and an uncooked top. So I'm gonna move it to the top of the oven now, the stone that's on top. It's gonna help brown out the cheese, dry out the peppers a little bit, and prevent us from getting a soggy middle on our pizza. And actually, I'd say we could use at least 4 minutes up there, huh? So the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. I also go into laminating process, which I touched upon a little bit earlier. If you take your old scraps and you fold them into your dough, it helps a little bit of the laminating. But essentially what you want to do if you're doing laminated dough is roll it out. It doesn't have to be perfect shape or anything like that. Roll it out, fold it onto itself, roll it out, fold it onto itself. And what you're doing is the flour that you're using on the bench, and then kind of like a biscuit, I guess, you're putting layers. And then the flour is preventing the dough from sticking to itself, which would then give you like a nice loaf of bread kind of feeling. But it's preventing that. So the air pockets in between the layers can puff up a little bit. That's called lamination. It gives you like these little waves in there. Real crispy. But you got to plan ahead of that. It's not something you could do on your final rollout, because every time you roll it out, you're working the gluten, you're getting it tense, it's going to want to snap back, be tight and constricted. So you have to roll it, fold it, roll it, fold it, put it in the fridge for a little while, leave it on the counter, let it proof a little bit more, relax, warm up. And you go through that process 2 times, 1 time, 3 times. Yesterday or last episode we did my cornmeal crust pizza, which is my #1 requested pizza recipe. Today we did Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago dough, which is my favorite, especially for thin crust. And if I'm doing deep dish, I grew up on Lou Malnati's. We were by the Buffalo Grove location, so we got it once a month, once every 3 weeks, something like that. And I replicated Lou Malnati's deep dish pizza. So that's one of the recipes in this book as well. It's a very buttery pizza, very flaky. It's a very different texture than most deep dish that you get out in the Chicago area. I'd say a majority of the deep dish in the Chicago area is more pillowy, doughy, and then you get some places where it's more like focaccia, and then you get the rare places where it's got like a thin, crisp edge on it, which actually that Rick Ricardo's dough that I mentioned earlier, the first published deep dish recipe, which is in here by the next page. This is fairly similar in texture, not flavor, but texture to Lou Malnati's. It's very crispy. It's a thinner crust. It's pretty heavy on the fat, 10%. This one that we just made was 7%. And then I have notes in how to make a deep dish, how you put it together compared to the thin crust. I got a chart again, step-by-step process. I have artwork in here from our first guest. If you guys watched the first episode where we did Philly cheesesteaks with Henry Winkler, Jason Newman was one of my guests, and he did the artwork. We were planning on doing a whole story series, but I rushed things. You know, I'm very impatient. And I just wanted to get this done and out, so I added them in here with a story of how it came to be. Here, laminated. So if you can see this picture here, you can see the waves of dough layers, real thin dough layers. Beautifully crispy pizza. Well, I would say one thing we learned today, for sure, is that 5 o'clock is a bad time to go live, huh? 6:30 now? So we're an hour and a half in? Oh, today? Oh, 6:30 is a bad time to go live. Oh, yeah. All right, so I'm actually going to go in for a little bit longer, but we could see that, you know, the bottom is still brown, very nice. We could still put some time on it, though. You remember earlier how thick it was? It's still pretty thick, but it leveled down a little bit. But I still want to brown the top more. So I'm going to do another 1.5 minutes. And then it'll come out looking gorgeous. Part of what's happening there is those roasted red peppers are very wet. There's a lot of toppings on it, even though there wasn't a lot of each pepper. There was 4 peppers total. So that's preventing the cheese from browning a little bit. And that's pretty much what's happening there. Hydration types. I mentioned earlier, you can use water, you can use beer or white wine, but you got to mix it with water. The alcohol content will kill the yeast. You can do scalded milk. There's milk that's just out of the fridge, half and half. It's pretty much it. I haven't found another hydration type, but those do work really well. Beer is a good one if you're doing like a what's guy fat? You say unctuous fat. Beer is good for that because it's kind of bitter, and so when you're using beer in the dough to counteract that bitterness, you get a little bit of fat, a little bit of salt. So bacon fat's a really good fat to use for that, or salted butter. This is what the dough looks like. I was talking earlier about it looking more like a head of cauliflower than a smooth dough ball. That's it here. And we're about to pull the other pizza out of the oven, but before we do, one more plea. If you go to the website listing, you can get the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. I authored this. This is over a decade of work. Notes, 4 different ovens. A lot of confusion happening there. Oh, God, yeah. All right. So, real quick before, that's how thin it is now. Compared to the 1.25" probably when we threw it in the oven. I have none of that. The first one when it came out, you saw that it was bubbling. It was more aggressive from the fat that was boiling around in there. This one doesn't have that because the cheese didn't fully brown. Still cooked, still beautiful, but this one had all the little it was like a layer of fat kind of waving, kind of like an ocean tide, I guess. This one doesn't have that because you could see it's still hot as shit, but there wasn't a lot of fat being expelled. Probably soaked into the peppers and stuff. Let's see what the bottom of this one looks like, huh? Oh, and I said, up here. We actually didn't shrink as much as I had expected. So the dough did come back to room temperature and relax enough. I expected this to be probably another 1/4 inch smaller around the sides. This looks fucking good. All right, ready to hear this? All right. My aesthetics can always use a little work. We got little pieces, big pieces. I'm more of a rustic guy when it comes to that stuff. I just don't have the dexterity that I used to have, you know? All right. So this is a very loaded pizza. Hot, still very hot. But you can see that we're not flopping. Over here. We're all over the place, huh? Over here. Hot, hot, hot. So it holds together very well. Now, when I rolled this one out, I knew it was slightly thicker than that one. We're probably talking about 20 grams difference, which is 10%, which is a lot then, 10%. Because I knew it was a little heavier, I knew I could load on the toppings. And that is why I threw on the roasted red peppers there at the end. Forgot where I was going with that. But, here's a little point. You see when I was talking about drying out toppings? Onion, I like under the cheese because it will almost all look like this if you're not putting more toppings on it. But this little black bit here got exposed to the air a little bit too much. And it charred. All right, bottom. Now this is probably okay to handle. Fucking gorgeous. You can see the gradient colors. There's like slightly pale spots, slightly dark spots, but there's a gradient in between. If this was more white and this was more black, that's, again, all preference, and all cooking is preference. And that's why I encourage you to write in the book if you get it. Take notes on everything you do, because what I'm doing, maybe it's a home run for you, maybe it's not. Maybe it's really close, but you think, oh, if I doubled the fat content or added more salt or ABC, XYZ, do it for you. You're the one that's going to eat it, right? I'm eating these. I'm doing this for me. You do it for you, and I would do it for me. So adapt and change it if you want to. No hurt feelings here. This is too hot to put in my mouth. I'm not even going to try it. Do you want to try a piece? Blazing hot? All right. So, thank you for joining us for episode 3 of Dinner with Downey. Another solo episode. Pick up a copy of the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. Available on Amazon at the link below. Rave reviews right now. I get people emailing me at least once a week. You email me questions and stuff like that. You have to. Check out Chicago Johnny's at Jewel Osco. And stay tuned for more episodes with guests as we get scheduling going.